3 true stories that are guaranteed to send shivers down your spine. They might seem like something out of a horror movie, but these events actually happen to real people. Are you ready? Let's begin. Our first story comes from a user named Clara, who shared her experience from a few years back. She was a college student living alone in a small off-campus apartment. One night, while studying late, she heard a faint scratching sound coming from her front door. At first, she dismissed it as a tree branch scraping against the wood. But the sound grew more deliberate, more rhythmic. Scratch, pause. Scratch, pause, pause. Her heart began to race. She tiptoed to the door and peered through the peephole. Nothing, just the dimly lit hallway. The scratching stopped. Relieved, she started to turn away, but then she heard it again, this time from the window right next to her. A soft, methodical tapping on the glass. She froze, her blood turning to ice. She knew she was on the 3rd floor. There was no balcony, no fire escape, nothing for anyone to stand on. She backed away slowly, grabbed her phone, and locked herself in the bathroom, dialing 911 with trembling fingers. The police arrived and found no one, but they did find long, deep scratch marks on both the door and the window frame. Clara never felt safe in that apartment again and moved out a week later. She never found out who or what was trying to get in that night. Next, we have a story from a long-haul truck driver named Mike. Driving through the vast, empty deserts of Nevada late one night is unsettling enough, but what Mike experienced was on another level. He was on a lonely stretch of highway, miles from the nearest town, when his headlights caught something on the side of the road. It looked like a child's tricycle, just sitting there in the dust. It was odd, but he kept driving. About 20 miles later, he saw it again. The exact same red tricycle parked by the roadside. He told himself it was just a strange coincidence, maybe a prank. But then, another 20 miles down the road, there it was again. The tricycle. This time, it was in the middle of his lane. He had to swerve to avoid hitting it. His heart was pounding. This wasn't a prank. It was impossible. He floored it, not daring to look back, his eyes glued to the road ahead. He drove for what felt like an eternity until the sun started to rise and he never saw the tricycle again. To this day, he can't explain it and refuses to drive that route at night. Our final story is perhaps the most chilling. It comes from a couple, Sarah and Tom, who bought an old Victorian house to renovate. They were excited, but neighbors warned them the house had a history. They laughed it off until strange things started happening. It began with misplaced keys and tools, things they blamed on the chaos of renovation. Then, they started hearing whispers from empty rooms. One evening, Sarah was painting a wall in the master bedroom when she felt a cold breath on her neck. She spun around, but Tom was downstairs. Later that week, Tom was working in the basement and saw a shadow dart across the far wall, even though he was the only one down there. The final straw came one night when they were woken by the sound of a child giggling. The sound was coming from the baby monitor they had set up in the nursery, which was completely empty. They checked the monitor's screen and saw a faint, shadowy figure standing over the empty crib. They packed a bag and left that night, never to return. The house remains empty, a silent monument to whatever still resides within its walls. Thanks for watching. If you have a scary story of your own, share it in the comments below. Don't forget to like and subscribe for more unsettling tales. Stay safe out there. They say you can't choose your family, but you can't choose your neighbors either. Sometimes that can be even scarier. Tonight, I'm sharing 3 true stories submitted by viewers like you about the neighbors they wish they'd never met. Let's get into it. Our first story comes from a user named Clara. She had just moved into a charming little duplex, excited for the quiet life. Her next-door neighbor, an elderly man named Mr. Abernathy, seemed sweet at first. He'd wave whenever he saw her and often left baked goods on her doorstep. But soon, the gestures turned. Strange. He started leaving her single, dead roses. Then, one night, Clara was woken up by a faint, scratching sound. She peeked through her blinds and saw Mr. Abernathy standing in her yard, just staring at her window. He wasn't moving, just standing there, with a chillingly wide smile on his face. This went on for weeks. The scratching, the staring. The police said they couldn't do anything since he wasn't technically on her property. One day, the gifts stopped. The staring stopped. Clara was relieved, thinking he'd finally given up. A week later, a for sale sign went up in his yard. The realtor told Clara that Mr. Abernathy had passed away in his sleep. While packing his things, his family found dozens of notebooks. They were filled, cover to cover, with every detail of Clara's daily routine, along with crudely drawn pictures of her sleeping. The last entry simply said, "Soon she won't be alone." Clara moved out the next day. Next, we have a story from Mark, who lived in a busy apartment complex. His downstairs neighbor, a guy he only knew as John, was a musician. Or at least, that's what Mark assumed from the constant thumping bass he heard at all hours. He complained to management several times, but nothing changed. One evening, Mark had finally had enough. He marched downstairs and pounded on John's door. There was no answer, but the door creaked open slightly. Mark, fueled by frustration, pushed it open and called out. The apartment was dark and smelled awful. As his eyes adjusted, he saw that the walls were covered, floor to ceiling, with egg cartons. The source of the thumping wasn't a speaker. It was a single, large drum in the middle of the room, with a bizarre-looking mechanism rigged to continuously beat it. But the most terrifying part was what was sitting in a chair facing the drum. A life-sized, incredibly realistic mannequin dressed in John's clothes. Mark backed out, horrified, and called the police. They later found out the real John had moved out months ago without telling anyone. No one knew who had been coming and going from that apartment, or why they had set up that creepy, endless drum solo for an audience of one. Our final story tonight is from a woman named Sarah. She lived in a suburban neighborhood with her husband and 2 young kids. Their next-door neighbor was a single woman who mostly kept to herself. One afternoon, Sarah's kids were playing in the backyard when their ball went over the fence. Sarah went over to ask for it back. The neighbor opened the door, smiled, and said she'd get it. But as she turned, Sarah saw something through the open door. The entire living room was set up like a child's bedroom, but it was all old and faded. There was a small bed, a rocking horse, and shelves full of dusty toys. It looked like a time capsule from decades ago. The neighbor returned with the ball and quickly closed the door. Later that week, Sarah was talking to an older resident on the street who mentioned the neighbor had a daughter who had vanished from the backyard over 30 years ago. She was never found. The neighbor had kept her room exactly as it was, waiting for her to come home. Sarah says she can't look at that house the same way again, knowing a mother's grief is just a wall away, frozen in time. Sometimes the scariest monsters are the ones living right next door, hidden behind a friendly wave or a closed curtain. Thanks for watching. If you have a story you'd like to share, let me know in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more true scary stories. Stay safe out there. This story happened a few years ago when I was living alone in a small ground floor apartment. The building was old and honestly, a little creepy, but the rent was cheap. My bedroom window faced a narrow alleyway that ran between my building and the next. I usually kept the blinds shut for privacy, but one night, I don't know why, I left them slightly open. My heart starting to pound in my chest. The alley was dark, lit only by a distant streetlight that cast long, distorted shadows. And that's when I saw him. A man was standing there, right outside my window, staring directly at it. He was just a silhouette, but I could make out that he was tall and thin. The scratching sound started again, and I realized with a jolt of pure terror that it was his fingernail tracing a slow line down the glass of my window pane. I froze, completely paralyzed by fear. I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. It felt like an eternity, him just standing there, scratching my window. I didn't know what to do. Should I call the police? Would he hear me? Would he try to break in? My mind was racing with horrible possibilities. After what felt like forever, he stopped. He just stood there for another minute, motionless, as if he knew I was watching him. Then he slowly turned and walked away, disappearing into the darkness at the end of the alley. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. I spent the day installing extra locks on my doors and windows, and I bought thick, blackout curtains. For weeks, I was a nervous wreck. Every little sound made me jump. I had nightmares about the man in the alley. I never saw him again, but the memory still sends a shiver down my spine. Who was he? What did he want? Why my window? I have no answers. I moved out of that apartment as soon as my lease was up. Sometimes, even now, in my new place, I wake up in the middle of the night and I swear I can hear a faint scratching sound, and I wonder if he ever found out where I went. What do you think? Was it just a random, creepy encounter, or was it something more sinister? Let me know your theories in the comments below, and if you have a true scary story you'd like to share, feel free to send it my way. Thanks for listening, and please, remember to check your windows. I'll see you in the next one.